In this edition of the News Review, bad news for French President Emmanuel Macron. A new opinion poll suggests that his popularity remains weak even after his handling of the Notre Dame Cathedral fire. According to the Ifop poll for a French newspaper, only 29% of those surveyed said that they are satisfied with Macron's performance. A whooping 69% expressed their dissatisfaction with the president and the way he has been ruling the country. The poll was published at the end of a dramatic week for Macron, which saw him address the nation in the wake of a devastating cathedral fire. The president vowed to rebuild the Paris landmark just in 5 years, which some observers have described as over-ambitious. Macron enjoys sky-high approval ratings, over 60% after coming to power in 2017. To discuss that further, of course, we're joined by our correspondent, Ramin Mazaheri from Paris, and also Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist from Bristol. Let's begin with our correspondent, Ramin Mazaheri. Ramin, can you tell us more about the popularity rate of President Emmanuel Macron? What was the main reason why his popularity plummeted to this point?
Well, I think we have to keep in mind that something like this article is written by AFP, which is Agence France Presse, which is a government-run media from France, and then it's reprinted by AP and Reuters. And it's couched in terms which are very misleading, because Macron dropping to 27% in one poll is not that big a deal. He has been around 30% since January 2018. And the reason that he fell to that number, we were talking about almost a year and a half ago now, is that's when his first budget came into effect. It was the second harshest austerity budget in the last 10 years, and it was especially tough on seniors. And his popularity rating has been between 29 and 33% for the past 16, 17 months. But, these headlines and these very, very biased sort of articles, they wanted to make it seem as if he was up at 40 or 50 or 60%. He hasn't been there since the first several months of his administration. He has been extremely unpopular for almost 18 months, and nothing has really changed. I think that the only thing that we can express surprise about regarding this new poll is that the fire at Notre Dame did not unify the country. Many people would assume that, the most visited, the most famous cathedral in Europe, all of the entire continent, that would unify the country. But that is really wishful thinking, because for 10 years, at least certainly for the last 8+ years that France has accepted austerity, there have been very, very deep-rooted problems that a fire at a church is not going to remedy, and not in a country like France, which is about 30% atheist. It's not a very deeply religious country anymore. So I think that's the only surprise here, but we cannot pretend that Macron has not been around 30% approval ratings, for the past 16 months. We have to remember these polls have a margin of error of 2 or 3%, so a fluctuation of only 10% is not a big deal. But it is absolutely very important for us to be discussing how this president can be so unpopular in a country which claims to be such a leader in democracy for so very, very long.
Thank you very much.
Of course, mention
Thank you, Ramin. That is a very important issue you just raised, which is something I was going to ask Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist who's joining us from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, how do you think this popularity rating will affect President Macron? As our correspondent said, France is a democratic country. This is something that should matter to the rulers of the country. How much do you think this will affect Macron? Will he arrive at a point where he will decide to resign?
Well, the Macron phenomenon is something we see right across the West, in fact. Prime Minister after Prime Minister is being elected, President after President, and what we then find is that their approval ratings fall immediately and they never recover. Basically, they are like Trojan horses in the West now. I mean, we've seen, for example, with Trump and his approval rating, the same exact thing with Theresa May here in Britain. Is that these are Trojan horse people. What they do is they manage to get into an election and then they betray almost all of the promises that they made during that election. In France, we had a very special case, really, because of the role of the Marine Le Pen and the right-wing nationalist party in France, which the media very successfully tarred them with the brush of the neo-Nazi far right. Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is they weren't anywhere near as far right as they were tarnished, but the French, being generally anti-racist people, quite rightly, rejected Marine Le Pen because they believed that that could take France down a very racist road. And what we've seen, actually, is that it was a bit of a trick to get this guy Macron, who's come out of nowhere, elected from the banking sector. That's where he's from, and that's the people he's working for. He's not interested in what ordinary French people want, and the French are not stupid. That's why they've rejected him. As we've heard, he's down to something like a 30% approval rating. I also say that there's a lot of there's interesting comments we just heard, because over the Notre Dame cathedral fire, there's a lot of atheists in France who do not buy the idea that Macron is putting out that this was definitely an accident. The jury's still out on what the cause of this fire was. And if Macron was really a fair president, he would be looking at the 10 plus churches just in the month of February, which were deliberately attacked in France. So there is some sort of movement in France which is trying to destroy and attack the Catholic Church. And there needs to be some sort of recognition of this by any president, not just for the sake of the Christians in France, but they're atheists too, who are also really sceptical about Macron's reading. And I think he's completely misread this. And the idea of jumping one way or the other, whether this was an accident or not, is a very bad, it's really a very negative thing for any
Thank you very much.
leader. He shouldn't have done that. And I think that he will suffer in the polls as a result.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gosselin. Let's go back to Ramin Mazaheri to get a wrap-up of this discussion. Ramin, do you believe that Mr. Macron even cares about his approval ratings? And if you could please make that as short as you can, we're running out of time.
Okay. He has said from the very beginning he's not going to be beholden to the poll. This Thursday, he is going to have, after a year and a half, his very first press conference, which is something that should really sort of sink in with our viewers. The first time he's going to have a press conference where he is going to field questions from journalists. This is a guy who has not even said the words yellow vest in public. So he is very much detached from reality, detached from the person's existence and their point of view. And he is leading in a very technocratic manner in tandem with Brussels. And that's why he's so very, very unpopular.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramin Mazaheri. And Mr. Gosselin, your final thoughts regarding this issue as we're wrapping up, if you could do that in less than a minute, please.
Yeah, I would suggest really that the technocratic way that Brussels has been heading, Macron absolutely represents that, and he doesn't actually care, because he's really interested in a career in banking and big business, and this is for him just a way of earning his spurs with the owners of France. We're talking about the rich and powerful bankers and banksters that own France. He's earning his spurs with them. So he doesn't give a fig for re-election, I don't think, because he knows that he doesn't care about that at all. All he cares about is the mates, his friends, his chums. He's privatizing and selling off the family silver in France too right now. And the French people know that. So there's no way they're going to allow him back.
Thank you very much. Our correspondent Ramin Mazaheri joining us live from Paris, and Mr. Tony Gosselin, investigative journalist, joining us live from Bristol. Thank you very much to both of you gentlemen for elaborating on this issue. And thanks to all of our viewers for following this edition of the News Review with us.